So in the chat, could you write to everybody where you're from? I mean, where you're sitting right now? I'm in Denmark, in Aarhus, London, Berlin, Zurich, Denmark, Utrecht, Ukraine, wow, Netherlands, Germany, Stockholm, Aarhus.
Oh. Lots from Aarhus.
Yeah, lots from Aarhus.
Mm-hmm.
That's my hood. I paid them all to get here. Berlin, Lyngby, Viborg, Copenhagen, Utah, USA. Oh, that's far away.
It is far away. We had someone from Kenya last week. That was cool. Okay, so Sarah, I'm very sorry. I cannot promote you to panelist. You need to be an attendee because we have reached 100 people. Sorry about that. Okay, so shall we just start?
Yes.
All right, I will just say a couple of words before we start. So for all of you in Amsterdam, Netherlands, or close by, Go to Amsterdam has been changed from June to December. So December 7th to 10th, it will take place at the Beurs van Berlage. So you get all the news, all the info on our website, go to ams.nl. Eino.
Mm-hmm.
Eino is, the first time I saw Eino was at Go to Berlin, and I thought, wow, such a tall woman, because I'm tiny. And then she was wearing heels. And
yeah,
I thought, what an awesome woman. I love it when tall women wear heels, because most don't, right? So
yeah.
I was very impressed. And when she started to talk about laughter and the importance of laughter, I was literally laughing for that whole hour. And it was amazing meeting you. And I'm very happy to have met you. And I'm very happy you're here. And Eino is also going to give a masterclass. So this is a little teaser. There's also a masterclass about how to succeed online with retrospectives. And I will post the link in the chat, and in the thank you email, you get all the information, all the links, everything you need. And it's a one-day masterclass with 4 modules of 45 minutes. So it's super good for online classes to not, fall asleep during and whatever, if they're like 7 hours long. So I'm very excited to have you here. Thank you everyone for joining. And I give you Eino.
Yeah, thank you all of you for coming. I'm so sad you can't see how tall I really am here sitting down, but if I got up, you would only be able to see my shins from where you're standing, so that would be kind of depressing. Yeah, so I thought when they asked me to do this go-to night that when I have all these people and I can't really see their reactions, I mean, I can see some of you on video, but the communication that I normally have with an audience, I can't really have that. And there are so many things I want to say, so 45 minutes is so very little time. So I thought I wanted to make it audience driven, but just to get you started, I thought about 3 questions that I wanted to ask myself and then answer myself. But then I think that the way that we'll do it is that if you have any questions, you can put it into the Q&A or into the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you can ask a question, and then I'll try to answer the best I can. Be aware though that I really like to talk, and it might be very difficult to interrupt me once I get started, and I might just look somewhere else so I can't see that somebody's trying to say something. So that is the only caveat of this talk. But let me get started. So I want to talk about what can go wrong at retrospectives, because I've been facilitating retrospectives since 2007. And I think I made almost all the mistakes you can make when you facilitate retrospectives. And I've also seen a lot of mistakes being made. And sometimes I take over a team that has been doing some retrospectives, and they have some very bad experiences with these retrospectives. So I'm trying to take their PTSD away from the retrospective situation and try to make these retrospectives efficient and enjoyable. So what I'm going to talk about today is things that can go wrong and how you can remedy it. And that's why I want you to think about things that you need help with and ask these questions, and then we'll see what happens. Maybe I can answer, maybe I can't. If I can't answer, I'm sure somebody else here can answer. I'm sure some of you are really experienced retrospective facilitators, and then I can just take a sip of water while I'm listening to you. Anyway, 3 questions. Who should you invite to a retrospective is the first question I asked myself. And what I say here is that, well, on the top of my head, I would say only the core team should be invited to a retrospective. Sometimes you will be asked to invite more people to retrospectives. Most often it is what I call a curious manager who's interested in seeing what takes place at a retrospective. What I normally answer when people ask me, can I join the retrospective as the manager? I say no, because the people who can fire or hire, I don't want them to be in the retrospective. I want the retrospective to be a safe environment where people feel that they can say what they want. Not because they want to talk badly about management, but because they want to say, there's some things here I cannot do. Perhaps I'm in a position that's problematic for me. Perhaps I'm struggling with some issues, something like that. So I would normally say no to that. There are some exceptions though. I've seen, for instance, startups where the manager is part of the team as well, where you'd say, well, he or she can attend the retrospective, but then it's as part of the team and not as a manager, and they're more on par. There are also other teams that I've seen where they have such a relationship to the manager that they really like the manager to be there, also because a lot of the things that they see popping up at the retrospectives is something that is out of their hands to do something about. So they actually need the manager there. So that would be one of the things I would suggest is it should be need-based who is at the retrospective. So for instance, if you have retrospectives with a team and there's a continuing topic that comes up that is out of the hands of the team members, something that they cannot change themselves with the actions or the experiments they decide to do at the retrospective, then they could choose to invite the manager. It could also be that one of the things that pops up at the retrospective has got something to do with what I call the API of the team. That is the borderline between the team and other teams. So it could be that some of the problems that pop up is communication problems with another team, or how is the handover, if it's still a handover, even though it's agile, you know what I mean? So sometimes if those things keep popping up and it's out of the hands of the team, then invite those people, perhaps a representative from another team or the manager. Then there's a question here, how about the product owner? Could he, she attend? Well, in my head, the product owner should be part of the team and should attend the retrospective. It poses some problems because some people say that, well, in our case, the product owner is actually somebody from the customer side and not somebody from this company. And then it can, of course, be difficult to have them at every retrospective, but it should be allowed, or it should be possible to have them perhaps at every other or every third retrospective, because the product owner, it plays such an important part of the team that communication really needs to work. But you can discuss whether it has to be every time. Yeah, Gita says it also depends on the purpose of the retrospective. It doesn't have to be about the iteration. So normally when I just say retrospectives, I think about those heartbeat retrospectives that you have every 2 or every 3 weeks, every iteration, or just every set regular time, where you look at what happened since the last time. Is there just asking questions about communication, organization, cooperation, how's the regression test doing, how's the technology, how's our focus, things like that. But you could also have a themed retrospective. So it could be that you have, normally when I start with a new team, I have sort of an open retrospective where I just ask about anything, and then a lot of focus areas pops up, and perhaps we can focus on 1 or 2 at that retrospective. But then I'm asking them, is there any of this that we could use as a theme for the next retrospective? And then perhaps we have a focused retrospective next time, which would be about how is the focus, or how is the vision for our product? And then of course the product owner should be there, and perhaps we should even have some people in the customer group at the retrospective, or the management because of that. So it all depends on the purpose of the retrospective. It could also be a very technical retrospective. I see that in a lot of DevOps teams. I've started facilitating for DevOps teams, and there's a lot of the communication in the DevOps teams that becomes very, very technical. And what they need to do in a DevOps team, because normally it's developers and operations that starts work together, merging in a team, is that they need to respect each other's work and each other's problems and challenges. And there we actually have to go into detail about how do we do it technically in this team. Yeah, so Mikkel says the product owner should always be in the retrospective, even if she is from a different organization, because that'll help build trust, transparency, and team spirit. Yes, it may be awkward at first, but it usually improves very quickly. Yeah, I agree with that. That's the ideal situation. I would definitely want the product owner to be there. I'm just saying that sometimes realistically it's not possible due to some politics or something like that, but I agree. And that actually takes me to the next of the 3 questions I asked myself, so thank you for that, Mikkel, is about trust. Because a retrospective should be a place where you feel safe to share the issues you have. So you should talk about the things that went well so that you can enhance that, but you should also talk about the things that didn't go so well so that you can figure out how to work around those challenges, or how to even get rid of those problems. And in order to feel like you can actually work with that realistically in the retrospective, you need to have the right mindset when you enter the retrospective. And this is where Norm Kurth, the original author of Project Retrospectives book, he made this prime directive. And the prime directive, you can Google it, I'm just going to read it aloud right now, is that regardless of what we discover, we understand and we truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. So in short, what he's saying is that when you enter a retrospective, you should have the mindset that everybody did the best they could at all times. Because if you don't have that mindset, or even just try to get that mindset, it might go into one of these blaming sessions that you sometimes see, and that gives people this anxiety about retrospectives. Because if something goes wrong, there'll be this blaming about, oh, she or he did that and they were stupid, or they were lazy, or something like that. And the testers are stupid and the management is just an asshole and things like that. But if you actually go into the retrospective believing that everybody did the best they could at a given time with what they had available, then it's much easier to listen to what people are saying. Because if you don't have that mindset, you're already closed and you are only hearing what you expect to hear. And also from the other side, if somebody was in a situation that didn't go very wrong, very good, if somebody made a mistake, then they'll be very worried, or even be afraid of talking about it at the retrospective, because they'll think that people think they're stupid, or people would get angry with them, or they'll get like fired or something like that. So they won't share what is necessary to share the retrospective. So the prime directive is very important. The problem with the prime directive is that even though it says we understand and truly believe, very few people truly believe that everybody always did the best they could. And this is something that I often struggle with. For instance, when I give presentations about retrospectives and I talk about this prime directive, and people say, no, that's just not true, because sometimes people are just slacking, or they're not doing their best because they're stupid, or they don't have the right education or something like that. But yes, perhaps, but they did do the best they could with the resources available. And if you don't at least try to have that mindset, then you won't get anywhere, and you might as well not have the retrospective. So to me, ignoring that prime directive is an anti-pattern. It is terrible to start a retrospective without having that mindset. And what I try to urge facilitators to do is to remind people about this retrospective in one in this prime directive one way or the other. So there's a question here. How can you convince everyone to have that mindset? Short answer is I can't. I can't. I've given up on that. I can't convince everyone to have that mindset, but I can try. I can do my best. I can keep reminding people when I invite to a retrospective, and in the email when I invite them, remember the prime directive, or remember everybody did the best they could, or just saying it out loud. I don't have to use the wording of the prime directive, but just saying it when we start. Always remember that everybody did the best they could. And actually that holds for everywhere in life. And that I think a lot of marriages could have been saved and friendship could have been saved if people just had that mindset that people are doing the best they can. And then I know that some people say, well, I know psychopaths. You haven't thought about psychopaths, but well, they're also doing the best they can, even though it's just not good enough what they're doing, right? But I'm just saying it is very difficult to convince everybody that that's true, but you should at least aim for that. Try to see how far you can get. And then perhaps what you can do during the retrospective is that you can show people that if they say something, we will do our best in this group to accept it and to react to it in a positive way and to react to it in a curious way instead of in a negative way. And you as a facilitator, if you are in a team where people are negative, you should be aware of that as quickly as possible, and you should help them have the activities so that the negativity is not too bad. So for instance, if you have a team where they're very negative toward each other, then perhaps you shouldn't have all the communications in plenum. Maybe you should have them discuss things 2 and 2 in pairs or in smaller groups, so that there's not this amount of negativity towards somebody who's saying something that they think is stupid or wrong. So I can see a lot of good proposals from Gitte here to print it and hang it up near the coffee machine and inside the doors in the bathroom. My mom wrote it with lipstick on her mirror. And then there's another question. Would you occasionally invite external collaboration partners, such as external QAs, and how would you get the best result with somebody who might not have built up trust with the remaining team? Yeah, well, to go back to what I said in the beginning, if there are some issues that the team cannot do themselves and we might have to invite someone there, well, you have to first acknowledge that you cannot magically get that trust with an outsider at the first retrospective. So it would have to be what you say called sort of a special concrete retrospective where you look at that. You could talk to that person before the retrospective and try to explain to them how important this is. And also trying to explain to them that even if you have to admit at the retrospective that you did something that you later learned was wrong, or you did something which was not beneficial for this team, or you even did something that broke something, then you can stay and feel safe that the team will not attack you because they do believe in the prime directive. And I will be there for you. I will help you. And I will do my best to protect you if anybody gets negative. But there is no magical button. At least I haven't found the magical button for making people feel trust. And when it comes to trust, I see trust as sort of an equation between two things, relationship and reliability. Well, that's to putting trust a little bit simple. But whenever I think of people that I trust, I always can recall when I think about these specific people, I have a relationship with them and I can rely on them. So for instance, if I have somebody in my team where if I ask them to do something or they say they'll do something, they will either do it or they'll tell me they can't do it for some reason. So I can rely on them. If they say they'll do something and then they don't do it and then don't let me know, then I can't rely on them. And then my trust goes down. So you can work on that with the processes and the methods you have in your team to make it easier for people to rely on each other, because we have processes for writing down, for instance, what you promised. But the relationship is also important. And the relationship is what you get if you know something about each other, if it's the whole human that is working with you and not just a little part of the human. So that could be something about using the retrospectives to learn things about each other, learning about the hobbies, learning something about just the favorite animals that we started with today. It's brilliant. Oh, look at that dog. It's a brilliant way to get under the skin of people. And so they're sharing something of their personal life, which makes them a bit more vulnerable, which makes them a bit more accessible, which makes it easier to ask for help because they suddenly look like humans and not superhumans. But also it's a different thing, because if you know that somebody likes good coffee or likes dogs or octopuses, you always have something you can talk to them about. So you can start the discussion with something that's comfortable for them. Just looking at the Q&A right now. So Mikkel says, external people should not be in the retrospective. However, you can always set up a meeting or workshop with externals with the purpose of improving collaboration, quality, etc. Just don't hijack the team's retrospective for this, because the team needs it for themselves. Yeah, well, if I invite people for a retrospective, I would make this a special retrospective, and I would use the retrospective facilitation tools. But you're right, for the sake of the team's mental health, I think that the retrospective is so important, and you shouldn't mess with that. They still need the regular retrospectives. So how would you introduce a retrospective to people who have not come across it at all without pushback? Oh, I love that question. I get so much pushback for retrospectives. Actually, I asked that exact question to Norm Kurth once at a conference, because I didn't know what to do. So I asked him, how do I sell retrospectives to people? How do I make them want to have these retrospectives? And he said, you can't sell retrospectives. Nobody wants retrospectives. But perhaps they want what they can get from a retrospective. So what you could do is that you could ask them, so what problems do you see? Or maybe you already know what problems they have in the team. And then you could say, well, I have a suggestion for a structured way of talking about these problems, talking about these issues, a structured way of figuring out what to do about these problems. Now, don't mention the retrospective at all. Just say that you're inviting to a structured conversation or discussion that will help them with the issues that they have. Because nobody really wants a retrospective in itself. Well, I want one, of course, because I'm in love with retrospectives. And I can point to another people here who want retrospective just for the sake of retrospective, right? But most people just want an answer to their problems, right? They want to be happy. Like everybody just wants to be happy, to figure out how to make them happy. And then perhaps you can say, well, this was a retrospective. Yeah. Let's see. So I just want to answer the third question I have to myself, and then I hope that somebody else will say something as well. What skills do you need in order to be a good facilitator? Yeah, well, that's something that I've learned over the years, that it's multiple skills, really. In the beginning, I thought to be a good facilitator, you just needed to be able to know a lot of activities. And I would feel very ashamed if somebody said, oh, you don't know the circles in soup? Oh, why don't you use the Agile pillars here? And I would say, oh, shame, I didn't read that. I didn't know that. I'm such a bad facilitator. But I know now that that's not a problem. So my memory is so bad, I can't remember the names of activities. I sometimes even can't remember the activities, but that doesn't matter because I have my computer and the internet. I don't have to remember all these activities. What I have to remember when I'm facilitating is that I have to do my best to make everybody else in that room shine. So I should facilitate that they talk about what they want to talk about. I should try to be invisible. So when I facilitated a retrospective and somebody says, I don't think Aino was even there, well, then I've won. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at being invisible. We're back to the height thing, but that is actually what I'm aiming at, to become a little bit more invisible, to be facilitating instead of leading, to listen to what people are saying instead of thinking about what I'm saying next. So I think getting your ego out of the door is a very important skill for a facilitator, because if you always think about how will I look good, how will I look intelligent, how will I look competent, you lose a lot of information, not just what people say, but also the body language that they have. And the body language takes me to another thing. I think it's very important to learn about body language to be a good facilitator. It's important because not everybody's saying something at the same time. So you have to look at their hands and their legs and their feet and where they're pointing and whether they're drawing air in very fast or something like that. So there's a lot of things you need to be a good facilitator, but not the things that I thought in the beginning. So I'm just going to look at questions here. I can only see the last question. I'm sorry if I missed one. So there's one from Christopher Hawthorne. Do you want to say the question yourself, or do you want me to read it aloud, Christopher?
There are a few further up if you want me to read them out loud to you.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
If you just read the questions, that'd be great.
Lauritz asks, how do you handle the retrospective where everybody says everything is going good over and over without much input, thinking about a longer period of time and several retrospectives?
Yeah.
Thanks,
So that's so I've written a book which is not out yet. It will be out in the fall over Addison Wesley and Amazon, and it's about antipatterns for retrospective. And this particular thing is an antipattern that I call nothing to talk about. And that's about teams where they say, well, we actually don't have anything to talk about. There can be many reasons for that. It could be that they think everything is going so well that they don't really need retrospectives, or when you start the retrospective, perhaps you ask them to put up post-it notes on a timeline. They're just like, I don't remember what happened. It's so long ago and nothing really took place and I don't know. So if that was what your question was about, this is what I would do. I would change the agenda for the retrospective. I would make it themed, for instance. I would figure out if there's anything in the team that goes better than other things, and then I could focus on that. One thing that I often do is that I use the pillars of Agile retrospective, which is that I look at the pillars of Agile and I say, well, how much communication do you have? How is the quality of the code that you're making? How is your communication with the users? How is the communication within the team, outside the team? So make them vote for specific things that could give them something concrete to talk about. And there'll always be somebody who doesn't think everything is wonderful. There'll be some of the things that are not so good. Maybe the transparency is not good. Maybe the quality is not good. So that's one thing I would do. Another thing that I would do is that I would let them know that everybody can improve. All teams can improve. Even people who are, for instance, professional skiers, they still take lessons and they still look at how they're skiing to improve their skiing all the time. Even though they're so good, you think they can't get any better, but they actually can get better. So it could also be, for instance, saying, well, how about a retrospective that is just a positivity retrospective where we're just looking at all the things that goes well and then see how we can enhance that to make that more. Or it could be a different, like a pirate ship retrospective or a retrospective based on a movie or something like that. Just do something else that makes them think about things in a different way. If it's because they don't remember what has happened, what you can do is that you can have a continuous retrospective where you set up a timeline either online, which is what you probably do right now, or in the room where the team sits, and then every day they can put up post-it notes if something happens that would make them remember at the retrospective because they actually put it up as things happen. I also sometimes ask them, what can we do to make this project fail? So given them sort of the anti-problem activity. And then they'll come up with things that could make this project fail. And what you hear then is interesting things. It could be what they're afraid might happen, or what they've experienced before that could happen. Retrospective based on a movie, what does that mean? Well, there are many ways of making the retrospective based on a movie. And one of the schools is that you say that this retrospective is a Star Wars retrospective, for instance, and then think of a scene from a Star Wars movie that describes how this team is working. So that could be, for instance, when Luke Skywalker, and I won't say anything about what happens in the movie because some of you might not have seen, when Luke Skywalker learns who his father is, like It could be describing a situation in a team where the manager suddenly said something to the team that surprised them or something like that. Or it could be in one of the newer ones, the Rogue, where everybody dies. That would make them think about the team structure in a different way. And it's that about, instead of saying, oh, look at this empty sheet of Post-it notes, now think of things that you want to change that can be difficult for people. So try to kick their brains out of where they are and make them think about it from a different side.
I've got some more questions further up. So Christopher asks, what advice would you give to startup founders that run Facilitate retrospectives? Founders are on the team as individual contributors as well. Are there any common pitfalls that we should be aware about as boss and team member?
Yeah. So the question, as I understood, was, what if you're actually a founder of the company and you work like a team member in the team?
Right.
Was that the question?
That was how I understood the question. Christopher? Did he answer? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here. That's basically it. Yes.
Yeah. So my experience with startups where the founder is part of the team and actually working with the team either as a product owner or a programmer or something like that, is that they need to be part of the retrospectives, because they play such an enormous important part in it. But there is a point in time where this doesn't work anymore. And that's when the startup starts growing, so that the founder becomes distant from the team and takes on more the role of the hiring and firing, where the trust perhaps is not the same. And then you can say, well, we want to still have the trust with the founder. But in my experience, at some point, the company will grow to the size where the founder needs to step away and let the team have the retrospective themselves. I guess people have a lot of different experiences with this, but this has been my experience, that it's important to have them there, but at some point they need to step out. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe if you could elaborate, we just had a previous question about everything being all okay. If a founder encounters the same situation, do you have any ideas there for how to, like, it might be because of the power dynamic, right? That
yeah, I see what you mean. So if the founder is at the retrospectives and notices that there's a trend, that everything is fine, nothing to talk about, that would be one of the signs that I would say that perhaps the founder needs to step away and let the team have the retrospectives themselves. It could also be that perhaps, now I don't know who's facilitating the retrospectives, but there's the issue about if it's always the Scrum Master or the project leader or the same person in one way or the other that always facilitates the retrospectives, it could be that they need somebody else to facilitate the retrospectives. If it's a small company, it's difficult to have somebody from another team. Otherwise, I would have found somebody from another team who can facilitate it. I'm an external facilitator to a lot of the teams that I'm facilitating, which means that I just facilitate the retrospectives and I'm not really with the team. And that means it gives me the superpower that they feel they can say anything to me, because I've got nothing to do with the company, so to speak. But I definitely think that you're right, that if you see repeatedly that they have nothing to talk about and there are no problems, perhaps the founder should step away and see if that changes the situation.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm just going down the questions. So Lena asks, should the team always have a say in choosing the topics for the retrospective, or can the Scrum Master decide based on observations or directives from management?
That's a good question. Well, my initial thought is that everything around retrospective should be voluntary. It should be voluntary. They should decide what they're talking about. They should decide whether they want to be at the retrospective or not, because if you force people to be at a retrospective, they can ruin the retrospective for other people. That being said, you can sometimes say, I think you need a retrospective which focuses on this theme. And then they will most often say, okay, let's do that. Because if you are a Scrum Master, you might be able to see things that they can't see because you're sort of sitting a bit to the side. Sometimes, even though you're part of the team, you see it from a different angle. And I think well, in my point of view, you should propose it very strongly. But I'm not in favor of forcing people to do things in retrospectives. Did that answer your question, Lena? Are you
That was the unmute button.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. While you were talking, I had a follow-up question, but I forgot about it. So maybe I will ask one in a minute.
Yeah, when you remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then Mans. When documenting the outcomes of the retro, would you mention who said what or just summarize the items?
Okay, so I do neither. When I facilitate retrospectives, the only thing I take away from the retrospective is the experiments or the action points. And that is for two reasons. The first reason is I've seen a lot of people who write down summaries of retrospectives and who said what and all the topics that were discussed. And it's not very often looked at afterwards. So that's one reason. But the other reason is more important, and it's about the trust. I really do believe that we should make people feel in the retrospective that everything they say in that room only exists in that room at that time. And when we leave the room, we don't talk about it unless people choose to. So that when I end the retrospective, what we come out with is 1 to 3 pieces of paper with action points of experiments that we want to do with the team until the next retrospective. And those are actually the only things that I allow people to take out of retrospective. I throw all the post-it notes away. And some people get really mad with me in the beginning when I do that, because they say, oh, but all these wonderful issues we could talk about, we shouldn't forget about it. And all these proposals for what we could do better, we should keep that and then we could look at it. And I say, well, tough, we're throwing it out now. Because if it's important enough, it will pop up again at the next retrospective. And so coming back to what I said in the beginning with managers at retrospectives, sometimes some things keep popping up at the retrospectives where you say, this is out of the hands of the team. The management needs to know this in order to change anything. And in that case, the facilitator can ask the team, would you be okay if I took this post-it note to management and said, this is important for the team? I'm not going to name any names about who put it up, but this is something you might want to work with. So if they allow me to take something back to management, then I can do that. And I have done that on some occasions, but mostly not. Mostly I just throw everything away.
So going back to having an external facilitator, Henrik asks, I have often considered, or he has often considered getting an external person to facilitate the retrospective, but is it such a good idea?
Well, both and, right? There's always like Diana Larsen always says, it depends, right? It depends on the context. So with an external facilitator, what you get is fresh blood, which can sometimes be good for a team, that the retrospective is facilitated in a different way, a new way, which can make it more exciting. You can learn something from the external facilitator about facilitating retrospectives because they've got a different set of experiences. It could also be, as I mentioned before, as an external facilitator, I have the feeling that people think they can say things to me because I won't talk to management because I'm not part of the organization. There are, of course, drawbacks with an external facilitator. And if you know the team and you facilitate the team, then you know what they like. You know who's a loudmouth, you know who's a silent one, you know who's a negative one. You can plan your retrospective so that if there's 1 or 2 loudmouths, you don't have plenum discussions all the time, because then the loudmouths will talk all the time. And you will make things so that if you have a lot of introvert people, that they will write down a lot more than saying things out loud. So there's a lot of things you miss if you have an external facilitator, of course, because the knowledge of the team, the knowledge of the people in the team is not there to the same extent. So it's both and, I would say.
Okay, and do you have any good tips for retrospectives for hybrid teams, like partially remote, partially in the office?
Yeah. So my sort of my main saying about hybrid retrospectives or meetings in general is that everybody should be equal. So that means if you have one team where you have 4 people sitting in one room together and everybody else as satellites with their own computer, then they're not equal. So you should either then make all the 4 people sit with their own computer in their own room, or you should try to make the people sit together in 2 groups or something like that. Because if you have some people sitting together and you have some people sitting at satellites, even you think you have good video tools and you can communicate, there will be some communication between the people who are physically in the same room. It could be that they're just sort of shoving a piece of paper to each other, you know, like you did in school, or just rolling their eyes, or it could be just looking in the same direction. It's like, you know, there's something we as human beings can do because of the whites in our eyes. We know what people are looking at. You know that if you're on the beach with your husband, you know what he's looking at, right? And that little subtle communication about where people have their attention can really be meaningful. And they can't see that if they just see a video. And even the smell of people, you can smell if people are afraid, you can smell if they're angry, not consciously, but that communication, that subtle communication, it has to either be for everybody or for nobody. Of course, sometimes you can't do that. I'm just talking about idealism. But if you have that hybrid, you should try to make it as equal as possible. And that also means that, for instance, when I have a conference where I have somebody, or a retrospective where I have somebody online, I write all their names on a notebook before the retrospective. And then when they've said something, I put a little line next to them so that I remember, okay, now everybody has said at least 2 things, or perhaps I can see this person has said 6 things and this person has only said 1 thing. Then perhaps I should change the way that we communicate. Maybe I should make a round robin where if somebody has a proposal, everybody has to say something about it. And it should be a round robin so that people are prepared for that question. So it's really unpleasant for people if you just sort of point at somebody and say, Giddy, can you answer that question, right? So if you want to do that, if you want to force people to answer it, you should say, now we're doing a round robin so that you know that you will be asked the same question. But there's so many things to say about that. Let's take another question.
Okay, Danny asks, he often struggles with finding the right balance between facilitating and participating. Ultimately, the fault lies with him being an active team member, but that situation can't really be corrected anytime soon. Any ideas for striking the right balance?
Yeah, that is almost impossible. I've been in that situation myself. And so either you choose to be a facilitator with that hat on, and you have to look at the body language, you have to look at the flow, the topics, you have to be focused on the time, you have to be focused on whether you need to change the agenda, and then you're not part of the retrospective. So you miss out on a retrospective for your team, or you decide to have the hat on as a team member, in which case you dive into the discussions that the team has because they're interesting to you because you're part of the team. And then you forget to keep an eye on the time and you forget to keep an eye on everybody. So what I normally say here is that could you in any way take turns with facilitating the retrospective? And I know that might be unpleasant for some of the people, but I haven't found any way to do that so that it makes you happy and you're a good facilitator at the same time. But what I have seen is that people sometimes in teams take turns with facilitating. So it could be that 1 or 2 of the other team members would be willing to try to facilitate. Somebody came into Mikkel's picture.
A doggy.
No, it wasn't a doggy. No,
What was it? Oh,
it was a woman.
there was a dog before.
Yeah, there was a dog before.
So what are the pillars of Agile?
Yeah. Well, when I say pillars of Agile, I'm sort of using it in a very vague way. You can look up the pillars of Agile online. And then what you see is that the pillars of Agile is sort of, if you build like a Greek temple, then there's some pillars that holds it up. So the pillars of Agile are these pillars that holds the temple of Agile up. So that is the principles, the Agile principles that you build agility on. And that could be like transparency. I don't remember them right now. We go back to that, but the memory. Somebody will be able to remember those and just spit them out. But what I'm thinking about here when I say pillars of Agile, I'm sort of doing it in a bit of an abstract way. I'm saying, here are the principles that we'd like to work with. Perhaps we want transparency, perhaps we want good quality, perhaps we want good communication, perhaps we want psychological safety, and then ask people to vote, where do they think we are with those things? So I draw like a little graph system with perhaps 4 different lines out or pillars. And then I ask people, so these 4 different things, where do you think we are between 1 and 10, where 10 is the best and 1 is terrible? And then I ask them to write down on the piece of paper, and then I take the pieces of paper in so it's anonymous. And then I put dots on the board so that you can say that sometimes, for instance, when it comes to the quality of the code, there might be a cloud of dots around 7, but then there are a few down at 2 and 3. And that is like a sign that you should discuss that, because people are not in agreement of the quality of the software. And that would be interesting to know, is the people who voted it low, is that because they know more than others? Is it because they know less? Is it because they look at a different way? Is it because the way that they evaluate quality of the software is different? And when it comes to psychological safety, you can ask them, how safe do you feel with saying something in this room? Do you feel safe enough to say anything? Like if you were about to get a divorce, or if you have cancer, or if you can't figure out how to solve this technical problem, or do you have a 0 safety feeling so that you don't want to say anything? You just want to smile and say everything is good. And then you can figure out, well, if you have some people who are below 5, then it's really a warning signal that you need to work with the psychological safety in the group. So when I say pillars of Agile, I'm using it in a very abstract way. I'm sorry. Does anybody remember what the pillars of Agile are?
I never heard of them. I only heard of the pillars of lean.
Well, I think there were some pillars of Agile.
Do you mean people over processes and tools?
Yeah, well, no, it's like I have this mental image.
We have Mikkel here. He is a Scrum Master. I think we could discuss the pillars of Agile. Isn't that inspect and adapt and transparency? Or is that for Scrum?
So inspection, adaptation, and transparency they are the pillars of empiricism. But I don't think there's a well-defined term for the pillars of Agile. It might be that some schools of Agile training have that as a term. It's not one I'm familiar with.
No, well, there you go. I'm confused you on a different level, right? If you Google for it, there's like tremendous amounts of pillars of Agile. What I was thinking was just take some different aspects and vote on how they feel there are about these things.
I like the term. It's fluffy.
Let's quickly move on to the next question.
Okay, so Morten used to do retrospectives in a pub next door, but are there other ways to shake it up? Because like the 15th retro in the same room with no new feedback is deadly.
Yeah, well, it's of course getting people drunk. It's a proud tradition in Denmark as well, which makes people talk about things they might not otherwise want to talk about. So that's definitely a good idea. But there are numerous ways of making retrospectives more engaging and more fun. So you could perhaps, like, sometimes you can take a bag of Lego bricks and then you can ask them to build the last sprint in Lego bricks. And it doesn't really matter how good they are at building with Lego bricks, but the point is just that whenever they've done something with their hands, they've used the brain in a different way, and it can be fun. You can also ask them to draw how the sprint was and then tell a story from that. Or if you know these Dixit game, there's a game called Dixit. I'll just write the name of it here in the chat. If you Google for that. It's got some amazing cards with very detailed pictures on. And I sometimes spread out those pictures and ask people to take a card that to them explains what the last sprint or the last month was about. And it doesn't really matter what they take, because whatever they take, there's always something they can say about the sprint or the amount of time we look back at that fits with this picture. Oh, there's this princess, and there's this prince trying to reach the princess, and the staircase just keeps getting longer and longer. Could explain, well, we never reach this goal. It seems like no matter how far we go with this product, we just find more and more faults. Or it could be devastating. It's like the fires of hell, and then people are talking about being tortured in the team. Or it could be a blissful one where they're walking a little group of happy dragons on a field, and then people can say, we really like to be in this. So anything that sort of makes people use their brains in a different way, I think is quite important. You can also take people outside and make them make a role play of a scenery that happened in the last sprint.
So basically that answers the question whether same style every time, focus on content and save because it's well known, or try to use different tools and styles and surprise the team from time to time?
Yeah, well, it also depends on the teams. I have some teams that really, really like to know what we're going to do, and they like to prepare for the timeline every time, and that makes them safe, and they like to be prepared, and they don't like surprises. It depends on the culture in the team, but then there's some teams who like people who get bored very quickly. They want new activities, new games. It has to be fun. Come on, give up some fun activities. And then you have to think about new activities. But in that case, if it becomes stressful for you as a facilitator, I would again ask you to invite some of the other team members to facilitate. Because one other thing that happens if you invite the other team members to facilitate is that they might appreciate your work a bit more. They might understand how difficult it actually is to facilitate a good retrospective. Maybe you are so good, you make it look easy, and they think, he or she is not really doing anything. Why can't they? I mean, this is good, but why can't it be brilliant, right? But if they try to do it themselves, then they might appreciate the amount of work you actually put into preparing it and the amount of energy you use to facilitate during the retrospective.
Could you please advise a format to reduce silos between product manager and engineers?
In the retrospective, I guess, or
yeah.
So one thing that I often see is those silos. I mean, sometimes they're created by management and the organization, but sometimes they're created by fear or misunderstanding. And then if there is a silo, then it becomes more and more, because our brains are hardwired to think us and them. So it's very easy for us as human beings to think us and them. So one thing you could do is that you could try to have a retrospective where you look at things where we are the same. So it could be that we have this tribe game as an icebreaker where everybody is standing in a circle, and then you say, for instance, I say my tribe hates skiing, and then I take a step forward, and everybody else who hates skiing takes a step forward, and then we can look at it and we can laugh and we take a step back. Then somebody else says, my tribe likes drinking red wine. Then some people go out, and then we laugh at that, then they go back. Some people might say, my tribe hates retrospectives, and that's always a very fun tribe to start a retrospective with. And then you can do something which is about the organization, or it could be my tribe has worked in this organization for more than a year, but it could also be my tribe does not have a tattoo. And then it can be very interesting for the people who does not jump into that tribe, and you look at everybody else and you're thinking, I can't see any tattoos, so where are these tattoos or piercings or something like that? It depends on what people want to share, but I think finding similarities is important. And another way of making them respect each other could be the role play. Coming back to the prime directive, if you understand everything, you forgive everything. So could they put themselves in the other silo's shoes, and then you give them a task, and then they say, what would you do if you were management? How would you solve this? And then let them brainstorm about that. And then perhaps things come up that they have misunderstood about the resources of the management, or the possibilities of the management, or what the management knows. And then the management will say, well, we didn't know we could do that, or this we can't do because of this, and vice versa again. So the role play, I think, is important to make people understand each other's, again, lack of resources, lack of knowledge, lack of possibilities.
This is interesting. Regarding marketing teams, event organization teams, or other teams who all have their separate tasks, who do not deliver every week like a developer team and might not work in a fully agile way or Scrum, would you still recommend frequent retrospectives, and how would you structure them?
Good question. I would always recommend frequent retrospectives. I even do it with my husband and my children, even though they're not all developers or in marketing, and we don't have sprints or anything like. Maybe we should have sprints. Well, we don't. But I would always recommend it, because to me, a retrospective is about learning. And it doesn't really matter how you're working, what you're working with, who you're working with. But the retrospective is a time where you take a pause and you look at what's happening. If any of you have read Winnie the Pooh, the Winnie the Pooh book starts with Winnie the Pooh being dragged down the staircase by Christopher Robin. And for every for every step, he bumps his head into the step. And Winnie the Pooh, by being bobbed down the staircase by Christopher Robin, is thinking, if only there was a better way to get down the staircase. If only I could stop for a moment and think about if there was a better way of getting down the staircase. And to me, that is the gist of retrospectives. It's about allowing yourself a pause to reflect on what you're doing right now and thinking about whether there's a way of doing it better. And that, I think, should work for everybody. And if you have it with a regular interval, then you make sure to remember everything and to continue to make things better.
Great, thank you. So I think this was the last question. But it's 6 o'clock or past 6, but if anyone would like to, shoot out another question, Aino, do you have another 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure. My family is cooking for me today.
Woo! Good on you. Oh yeah, here's one. Is it possible, or is there a good way to make retro not only for one team, but for example, for 2 or 3 teams together?
Yeah. Yes. Of course, that is a good idea as well. Sometimes people call it a retro of retros, and there are many schools of how to do this. So one way to do this, of course, would be to just have all the 2 or 3 teams in a room and have a retrospective with them. If you do that, you have to think about how ambitious you are with the retrospective. There will probably be a lot more preparation on behalf of the team members. They would know what they want to focus on. It would be a themed one. It could be about the communication between the teams, or it could be about the quality of the thing they're doing together. Because I think having like an open retrospective with 2 or 3 teams, it would be too ambitious to have. So it would be good to have a theme. And then you also have to think about when you plan a retrospective, how many people are there and how much time do you have? Right, because if you have 60 minutes for a retrospective and you have 10 people there, and then you can divide, you have 6 minutes for each person, but you also have to withdraw the time you take to explain the activities and they use to think about what to put on the post-it notes and voting and things like that. So perhaps we're down to 3 minutes per person. And then you can think about what can I get out of having people having 3 minutes to talk in the retrospective? And the short answer is not very much, right? So if you have that amount of people, you should consider having perhaps a half day for the retrospective, so that there is time for breaks and there's time for discussions as well. Another school of doing a retro of retros is that's more if you have more than 2 or 3 teams, is that you take representatives from each team and they have a retrospective with each other. So that we take 2 perhaps from each team of the 8 teams, and then they have a retrospective with each other, and they take with them things that are interesting for the boundary between all the teams. So it could be, for instance, if you have, like I said in the beginning, you have some retrospectives where something pops up all the time that the team can't really do anything about themselves, but it's something to do with the communication of another team or the organization or something like that. Those are the things that they could bring to a retro of retros.
There is one more question. How to make sure the action points from the retrospective is followed up so something really happens?
Oh yeah, that's very important, because if
I'll say here, this is the last question, because Aino is also giving a masterclass, which I am going to post as well, the link, so have a look. When you're interested, check it out. And yeah, I'll let you know.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So if I say everything at this masterclass, then this, is not a good investment. Anyway, so the question was, how do you make sure that you follow up on the action points? And that is really important, because if you don't follow up on the action points, then the retrospective part of it is sort of useless. You still have the sharing and you still have the venting, but if you don't actually try these experiments or do these things that you decide to do, it can feel like a waste of time. So if you work together, if you sit in the same room, then I try to encourage people to write the action points or experiments up on A4 paper, and you put it under the board if you have a Scrum board, or on the wall in the room. If you don't have that, you can put it on whatever Confluence site or whatever you have. That can help. For some people, they acknowledge that it's not enough, and then what they need to do is put it in as actually a ticket in Jira or whatever they use for the backlog, so that it becomes prioritized as part of everything else. And I like that way as well, because it means that the things that come out of the retrospective are actually prioritized in the same way as all the other things that should be done in a team, so that working on the team, the health of the team, becomes as important as working on the health of the software. And then remember to ask them at the next retrospective what happened.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I guess our hour is up. I am posting as well Aino's contact details in the chat. So you can also contact her, ask her questions, join the masterclass, whatever you need to know. If you have any questions for me, I will send you all a thank you note. So just, my email will be there. Aino, thank you so much. This was so interesting. And yeah, clap, 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 clap. This was a wonderful, wonderful go tonight. You're getting lots of thank you messages right now. I hope you can see them.
Yeah, I can see them scrolling. Oh my God, it makes me very happy. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining for a go tonight. I'm very happy to have you here, and I'm very happy all of you to have joined. This was amazing. We had lots and lots of people. Sadly, I could only make 100 people panelists, and the rest had to stay as attendees and couldn't join with camera and microphone. I'm very sorry about that. Next time, join earlier. But yeah. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I hope to see you soon. And Aino is also going to speak at Go to Amsterdam in December.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm very, very much looking forward to that. So Aino has some talks online. I will post the one. No, I don't know.
I'm very easily Googleable. So
yes. So on the Go to Conferences channel, there are a few talks, and she's very easily Googleable.
And good luck with your retrospective facilitation.
Yes, I think I will have to suggest that to the team as well. Now after hearing all this, it's very interesting. I loved it. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a lovely sunny day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, I see some new people now. That's nice.
Yeah. We had pages and pages of faces.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Aino. I'll see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah. I won't say any more before the masterclass.
It's soon. It's June 10th, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So yeah. But I'd love to have you back at some point.
Yeah. I love that as well. It's easy like this, sitting in your home doing it.
It is, right? Yeah, I enjoy. I do love people, and I love go-to nights with people around me. But doing this as well, it's nice. It's satisfying as well.
Yeah, I wanted to share something with the people who stayed behind. Can you
Okay.
see this?
Oh,
So this might be the cover of the book. We're not quite sure yet, but there's a little octopus playing all the roles of the antipatterns and playing the facilitator and the team and stuff like that. So
nice.
yeah,
Oh, that is so awesome.
they're cute, aren't
Love
they?
it. I love it.
And this is nothing to talk about, where the team thinks everything is brilliant. I'm looking so good, but they're not looking at all the trackers below here.
This makes sense. It's nobody can see that I'm wearing sweatpants.
Exactly. You look beautiful, what we can see. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with everybody who's still here.
You should have mentioned more of the names of the patterns in your book, because I know that you had them.
Yeah, I should have. Yeah. I made that decision that I would talk about my book and talk about my book and talk about my book and name drop all the anti-patterns, but I completely forgot.
I wanted to do it for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, you do it during your masterclass.
Yeah, if I remember.
And yeah, so if you would like to do a book club, I think we didn't really talk about it before. So yeah, so every day half an hour, or 3 days in a week, just like half an hour at noon or 12:30, and just have people who want to join read the chapter and then talk about it and answer questions. And
that
then
would be very interesting.
You basically tell me what I'm meant to send to them, and then I'll send them the link or the page or whatever.
Yeah, but the book fits very well because it's 24 anti-patterns, right?
Yeah.
So I could send an anti-pattern every time.
Yes. We could also do 24 days. I'm happy doing that.
That's a lot. I should have done it before I sent the book for print then, so I could get the feedback in.
Yeah.
But it's Friday. I have to send the text in this Friday, so I don't think we'll make it.
Are you under pressure, or are you all
Oh
good?
yeah, this is my book in the background. You can see that somebody said, oh, why don't you go through all the anti-patterns and change this in all of them? I'm like, God, why do you say that 4 days before I have to hand in all the text? It's a brilliant idea, so I can't leave it alone, but
okay.
Yeah, under pressure.
But let's do a book club, a week of book club, half an hour.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be great.
And we always do it in like smaller groups, so not 130 people we had today, but 30 only. So small, and so everyone can talk.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, 130 people, it's impressive, but I don't really get into contact with all of them.
Exactly. That's why, like, for the book club, a smaller group is usually better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
So when will the book come, or when would you just get back to me? You've got my email address.
Yeah,
I'm
get back to you.
I'm very happy to run a book club, and it's really fun. So
definitely after Friday.
Yes. So good luck on Friday.
Oh, thank you.
And Monday.
Yeah, I might have to postpone till Monday and ruin my weekend as well.
Oh. Do you have a long weekend?
Yeah, a long ruined weekend. But it's fun. I mean, it's every time I work on it, it gets better. So it's very rewarding in that way.
Okay. Well, let us know where to get it.
I will.
I will post it out.
It'll be on Amazon for pre-sale in June. So.
Okay. Do you have any link already? No.
No, because we're still working on the cover.
Okay.
So we need the cover to be ready before we put it on Amazon. But then.
When you have it, shoot me an email with the link, and I'll distribute to the group that has been.
That'd be great, actually. Yeah.
It's very targeted, so.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good idea. Yeah, I'll see you.
I am going to end
I can smell the food.
For everyone. So have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.